All right. Hey, guys, we've been having a good time here. I'm Lauren,
Lucy.
Better You is Better Living, where we talk about helping you better yourself, better others, better your life, using emotional intelligence and all the things that entails. So make sure you listen up, go give us a review too, because that helps us create this content. But today, we have an awesome guest with us. we've been talking a bunch before already, but we have Lindsay Kelly with us. She is a wife, a mother of 6, right? A caregiver, an entrepreneur, a life coach. Did I miss anything else? All the cool things you do.
I'm a house cleaner, a housemaid.
There you
all
go.
the things that
She's a
come.
comedian. We've been laughing our heads
Yes,
off.
yes. And we've actually been having really good conversations about emotional intelligence because
Yeah.
you talk about that
Yep.
in your life coaching. But first, I want to say, because you do all those things, can you kind of give us a story about how
Yeah, the backstory.
the backstory, like how did you get to where you are now?
Well, my experience as a caregiver to my husband. Well, do you want me to start with that?
Sure,
like
whatever.
what?
Start from day one.
Day one. Here we go. When I
life
was
of
born.
Lindsay.
No. Okay, so actually in 2013, I didn't know what was wrong with my husband, but he started having these kind of these episodes where he'd get really upset, and I didn't know what was going on with him. And I was like, is this what a midlife crisis is? That was what I thought, because I'm like, he'd go in these rage modes and then he'd come down after a few days. And I was just like, but he was completely irrational. And so I was like, what is going on? Slowly, over the years, so 2015, he started getting worse and developing anxiety. And then in 2000, I'll make a long story short, but 2019, they finally diagnosed him with progressive MS. And he had MS when we first got married. So I knew that he had MS when we went into our marriage. He was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS. And in 2019, our worlds were just flipped upside down because he was totally changing. I didn't know what was going on with him. And he got diagnosed with progressive MS. So my world, I started realizing, oh my gosh, like I'm going to be not just a full-time mother, but I'm going to be the full-time breadwinner of my family and the full-time caregiver. And that was just like, how am I going to do this? I've just came up against it just felt like I was up against a brick wall. Like, what am I going to do? And how am I going to do this? And I remember going to my parents' house at one point and being like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? And I remember the look on their faces of like, we have no clue, but we're here to help you. Like they were just like helpless, like looking at me like, we want to help you, but we have no clue what to do. My parents became therapists over the last few years. Like I seriously think they need a degree just from going through all the stuff they went through with me. But yeah, so through that, I wanted to help other people and help them not feel alone, because through all of the stuff with my husband, I didn't know anybody who had suffered from MS, who had mental issues. I just thought he'd be in a wheelchair when we got married. I just thought there's a possibility that I'll be, helping him with disabilities, but I didn't know that it would affect him mentally and short-term memory loss and all of that. So and there was just so much that came with that, people not understanding because he seems fine, and I did not want anyone to feel like they had to go through this alone. So I started sharing my story on social media. During the midst of it, I went to the life coach school, became a certified life coach, and decided I wanted to really help people learn to manage their emotions surrounding the circumstances that they were going through. So yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So can you, because I imagine you went through a lot of those same emotions.
Yeah.
So at what point, can you share with us some of those like emotions, or at what point when you knew that you had to, like, okay, I have to change my mindset. I have to look at this a different way because you are now the breadwinner, the caregiver, all those things. What did it take? We were talking about this kind of the other day, and that mind shift that people have to have. Like on this show, we talk with people, with different things, different life experiences and things like that. But ultimately, it's up to you, and you have to shift that mindset.
Right.
What did it take, and also when do you feel like you had that shift and you were able to do all these things and then reach out and help people?
So I'll tell you kind of a story, and this is kind of what my life coaching program is based off of, is during that time when my husband was declining, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it'd be so nice, because I had all these roles I was taking on. I was the caregiver. I didn't have my husband to lean on emotionally. I was just alone because he was losing his mind. So I couldn't be like, oh my gosh, today was so hard. Or even like the financial stuff where I'm like, God, it'd be so nice if somebody worked while I could take care of kids and my husband. And I remember just thinking, it would be so nice if somebody just swooped in and rescued me. And in my mind, I kept thinking, you rescue yourself. You have to rescue yourself. So my program that I created is called You Rescue You, because every time I thought of an escape, I thought of like, oh, I need to have somebody, not I need to, but it'd be nice to have somebody help me. I kept telling myself, you rescue you. You have to rescue you. So that went through, I went through a lot of different emotions. I had to work past family members not understanding, and even some of the things they'd say about almost blame. This happens with caregivers all the time, but blaming the caregiver for what's going on. And I had to work past that. I had to work past not having a husband. And you find this, you have to find this new identity in all of it. Like, you're married, but you can't rely on your spouse. And so I just had to figure out who Lindsay was as Lindsay. And that doesn't always look pretty when you're trying to figure out who you are. And even during the process of it, I think that's one thing about posting on social media is people think you're this perfect person, or they think you're perfect. And I'm like, no, I have found unhealthy escapes during this because I had to re-identify who I was. I've had to figure out what I wanted to do. I even, like, at some point when I thought my husband was going through the midlife crisis, I was like, am I getting divorced? Like, it's not an easy process to go through. Right. And people just, I think they think you have to live this perfect life if you want to post on social media about your crappy story. So anyway, so that's kind of where, in the middle of it, I was just like, I have to rescue myself. I have to figure out my emotions. Like when I saw my parents' face and they're like, we are going to help you. And they dove in to help, but they didn't really know how to help me, which still felt lonely. I came up against this wall where I'm like, this is on me. I've got to figure myself out. I've got to figure out who I am as a person and just move forward.
Yeah.
So do you think that prior to these events happening that you had that awareness of yourself? Do you think that 5 years before this happened, if you had found yourself in maybe a difficult situation, but the circumstances themselves were different, that you would have had that thought of you rescue you? Because I think so many people look outside of themselves.
Yeah.
They want someone to step in. They don't want to take accountability. They don't want to have to carry the load on their own. And so I'm just curious, were you inclined to that kind of thinking and perception of life before this happened, or did this event push you mentally and emotionally in this direction?
I think I've always had it in me to be driven, and I've always kind of been this person, almost like I'm determined to get something done. So like, I've had that where I am like self-aware, or when I can look within myself and be like, okay, I need to change this about my life. But one thing I tell people is, well, you really don't know what you're made of until you are faced with that. So I can't really answer that like, yes, I've always had this in me, because I haven't. I think it comes with a process of, I always tell this part of it, as I remember when I had just my first baby, it was so hard to have one baby for me, because I wasn't like that kid that was like, oh, I got to babysit all your kids. That was like, it was fun. Like, I thought kids were fun and stuff, but I wasn't like that type of person where, yeah.
Baby hungry?
Yes. And I mean, I did, obviously I had 6 babies.
Right,
so yeah.
right. But
I guess baby hungry, yes,
some people have the fever more than others.
Yes.
So.
Like as teenagers, like I can see the people in my neighborhood who are just like, girls who have their babysitting kit and everything. And I'm like, that was not me. I was like, let's go play and do something. But as far as that goes, I was never like that kind of person. But when I had my first baby, I was just like, oh my gosh, how do people have a kid? This is so hard. And I remember just feeling like I was a mess. Like I couldn't sleep and I just didn't know how to do it or what I was doing. And then I had 2 babies and I was like, this is so hard. Like it was so hard for me.
That's when I gave up.
You had just 2 kids.
I just got 2. I was like, I'm a quitter.
Yes.
I'm done.
It's not a quitter. It's challenging no matter how many you have, I think. But yeah, with 2 kids, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And then I went on to have 4 more. But I
Good on you. Good on you.
But at that time, it was just like, this is so hard. And so one thing I've realized is like, I look back at myself at that time and I'm like, that was so hard for me at that time. And so when people tell me that they are going through a hard time, and to me, I'm like, that is nothing. You know what I mean? But to them, it is so hard. Right. Just like having 1 baby was hard for me. So I think back on those moments that build you to do something more. And I know maybe mine sounds like wimpy to you guys too, but that was a hard moment for me to have a baby and then, you know, have more babies and to go through all of that. But I think that we have little moments that build us up to something greater, you know?
I completely agree. I think sometimes people lack the awareness to really identify those moments and to recognize that they're mastering something within themselves and that it translates to other aspects of their life. And so I was just curious. My backstory, I lacked a lot of emotional management, and it was a long process to learn that self-mastery. And so I'm always just curious when I encounter someone who exhibits that emotional resiliency and that grit, you know, were you born that way or did you cultivate this? Because I think that both scenarios exist. And I think that emotional intelligence is absolutely something that can be learned, but it does require that awareness. And so I just get curious. And so I appreciate you answering that because it just gives a little more insight into who you are and how you've handled life and what you're capable of. And then you model that to other people. And that's really where that social media piece comes into play is I can do hard things. I can face hard things. You can too. And that's what I would imagine that you're hoping most people pick up on when they're following your story.
You know, I don't know what I hope they pick up on. I just don't want them to feel, I had so many people tell me, like even doctors not really know what to tell me. Like I'd be like, no, he has memory loss. And then I'd have neurologists be like, oh, he's fine. There was like this little paper that they'd take. And he's like, no, their memory is bad. His memory is fine. And I'm like, he can't remember a conversation we had this morning. Like he can't remember that. Ask him to recall what we talked about an hour ago. And neurologists were just telling me, oh, he's fine. And it wasn't until I got like psychiatrists on board that they were able to give him a correct diagnosis. And so I just didn't want people. I just didn't want people to go through that alone. But there's also inside of all of us this calling to help other people, and some of us maybe it's stronger than others. But I do feel like you make your mess your message. I just made a post about that yesterday. I like that. I just look back at all my past experiences, and when you go post yourself on social media, you can see all of your past mistakes and all the unworthiness and all of that. You're like, I am certainly not worthy to post on here because I have not lived a perfect life or done any of this perfect. And so you face all of your own, what they call the imposter syndrome in some aspects. Mm-hmm. But I think that I just didn't want anyone to feel alone. So when I get those negative comments on my social media, it's easy for me to look past them. Not always, because they sometimes get to me. But it's easy for me to look past them because I'm looking for the people who are just like me. So I actually, in December, started a caregiver support group. And that support group is at 1,400 people right now. There are 1,400 people who are just like me. And then in February, I'm like, I'm going to start this autoimmune disease support group because I would have people reach out to me and be like, oh, I'm going through that same thing. I even have met plenty of people who have their spouses in assisted livings that are my husband's age. And so I'm like, that was surprising to me because I'm like, I had heard of a few, but then when you put yourself worldwide, there's so many people. And so I had people who were caregivers, and then I had people who had MS or had an autoimmune disease, and they're like, I am terrified to death of what I'm going to experience. And your videos scare me and inspire me at the same time. And so I started this autoimmune disease support group, and that's been awesome too. But I was going to say something about you saying you haven't always had that emotional intelligence. And I think you go through these phases as you get older. Like you move out of your parents' house and you might be like, oh, my parents, this and that. You might have negativity against your parents. But I'm able to look back at those experiences that I was negative about, maybe at 20 and 25 years old, and look at them and be like, oh, that was why I had to go through that, is because now I'm going through something tough. And that's why I had those issues with my parents or my siblings or whatever. Everything in life, I think, it's just one big schoolhouse, and it builds us,
Yep. And you wouldn't give really any of it up.
No.
If, I've reflected on that so many times and have asked other people, if the only way to ensure that I arrive in the same place I am today is to knowingly take that same journey, I would with vigor, right? Like I would just be, okay, yeah.
Paint store and all. You do
Everything, everything, right? Because it all becomes a part of who you are, and everything is a building block. And so, yeah, I wouldn't want to undo those things, but I don't know. It's just interesting. I'm always just really blown away and am with you as well, just to see that resiliency and that grit. And I admire that.
Yeah. I'm sure you've gone through, like you said, your own stuff. And I think you just don't know how you'd handle it until you face it.
Right.
And I'm sure you faced, maybe you're just not giving yourself enough credit as far as the emotional intelligence
I think
goes,
it just looked a little different, and so there's the journey looked a little different. But I'm very, very, very grateful for my path and just how my awareness came about, because there's a level of compassion and sensitivity that I feel I can offer others that not everyone can. And so you become grateful for that. That doesn't, but those things are hard.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just applaud you. I'm curious to know how old your children are.
Okay.
And you've got 6 of them.
I got 6. So my oldest is 19, and she lives around the corner from my house. And so 19, 18, 16, 14, and then 10 and 9. You got that? You got it? Sometimes I don't got it.
So what has this been like for them?
I think for all of us, it's become our norm. It's become like our everyday, how do you explain that? You get used to your own hard. And so at first, all of us, that was one of the things where I was an emotional wreck a lot, because I was just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But I couldn't always portray that to my kids. They would see that I was having hard moments naturally, but I wasn't going out of my way to make sure that they saw I was having hard moments. I'd go in my room or something, but they've all had to manage their emotions. I did check-ins with my kids, especially my older 4, because they watched my husband go from being able to be a fun, loving dad outside playing with them to going in these mood swings and having to help him through these mood swings. So we've kind of been through it as a family, and but they're doing great. That's the one thing that I've realized with kids is it's like sometimes we want to bubble wrap them and be like, okay, don't get hurt. You're okay. Don't see that. We don't want, but then I don't think that's healthy either. My kids have been so helpful to me, and it's all because they couldn't have a mom that was a helicopter mom, because I was working and I was taking care of their dad, and I was emotionally spent and physically spent. And so I looked at that and had guilt trips. And now I look at it and see my kids aren't perfect by any means, but I see how much they've grown through all of that. So it's been a good thing for my family. Sad, but good. I'm that's the other thing you see it. Like you said, you wouldn't take any of that back.
Right.
Seeing what my kids, how much they've learned, I wouldn't take any of it back because I see how much they've learned through it all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've seen some of your clips on social media, and you see them, helping him and help, and they wouldn't have got there unless they gone through hard things.
Yep.
With all that, with all of our kids and the way they are, they're not going to get to being the best versions of themselves without going through those hard things. So I see that and I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
They're helping out and all the good things. And I'm sure it's not easy, but they seem to be going through, handling it well and seeing and growing and being good people. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
It's cute.
Good job.
At moments you get used to your kids doing that. I'm like, hey, can you walk dad down to the restroom or whatever? For example, we went to my daughter's school play last week, and I can't walk in the bathroom with him. So my son's just like, come on, Dad, I'll take you. So but they're not thinking anything different. And I think that's, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. At times you step back and you're like, oh, this isn't like everybody's normal life. But it's become normal to us, you know?
Right.
And so you're just like, oh, that is kind of sweet that he's taking him. And I don't know, but to me, it's just normal. But then some people are like, oh my gosh, that's got to be so hard. And I'm like, well, not really. I've already gone through the hard part. I mean, there's hard moments. Everybody has hard days, but yeah.
Yeah, but everybody kind of steps up, rallies around, and makes stuff happen.
Yes,
that's awesome.
It's sweet. It's sweet to see his kids
that.
do
Just that
his.
unity.
Yeah, they just we all love him. He's so fun. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So speaking of emotional intelligence and these hard things that we're going through, and we have this discussion of what we've been through and how it created us. How can we help others see that? And I know when I've been speaking and things like that with different groups, I share a little thing about empathy, right? So one of the things, I have a acronym that I've created, and one of them is empathy, but I also talk about showing empathy towards yourself. And in those moments when those things are happening and they're hard, you need to show empathy to yourself and say, I've done this hard thing. I can get through this other hard thing because I've done it before. Show a little empathy to yourself. So how do we get people to do that, or think hey, I've done this. I can do hard things, and have that switch go on in their mind, and so that they can have that grit, and so they can push forward.
One of the things that comes to my mind that I really, as far like you saying empathy, I think all of us can look at other people and be like, oh, they're going through something so hard. I'm less than them. You look at yourself as if your problems don't matter. I've had so many people say that to me. I even had this lady at my CrossFit gym. We've been working out for years together, and she's like, some days when I think I'm going through a hard time, and then I think of you, and I'm like, my problems aren't anyway, but it goes back to that whole thing where it's hard is relative. Mm-hmm. But when you were saying that, one of the things that was a huge thing for me to understand is that it is okay for me to feel negative emotion. It is totally okay. I think sometimes we get these negative emotions, or even frustrated at our situation, or for me, I was kind of mad at God, and so I was walking my own road for a while there. But sometimes we think that life is supposed to be a certain way, and we have these feelings and frustrations because we have these expectations of how life was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I think shifting my expectations to just allowing myself to feel the negative emotion, and shifting what this life is all about. And this might be a little bit, I don't know, heavy, but I won't ever have my husband in the same version that I had him at once. And you have to go through the grieving process. You grieve the life that you once had with your spouse, and you grieve that you will never have that again with your spouse. And you have to wrap your mind around that at some point we all die. And there's not I think we all have this expectation that we're going to die 80 years old or 90 years old in our bed with our spouse, and we're going to die on the same day, and it's going to be all blissful, Yep. And I think that was one thing that I really had to shift, is that this is an eternal thing. Like, we don't live forever. And what is to be learned from this thing that I'm going through? So allowing myself to feel negative emotion and not beat myself up over it, for shifting my expectations and forgiving myself for past mistakes I made, for when I was in a bad place in my life, when I wasn't really emotionally strong. And even though I knew I wasn't doing right things, it was like, or things that were in alignment with who I wanted to be, I have compassion and empathy on myself that if I had been on stronger ground, I know I wouldn't have done those things. But because I was trying to reinvent who I was, I have to have compassion on myself. So I do like your empathy thing. And it's okay, instead of fighting off the negative emotion, just allowing it to be there, just carrying it with me like a purse. Like, all right, come on, shame, let's go. We're going to the grocery store today,
I love it.
I like that analogy. I
Yeah.
mean, so many people do judge their emotions, though.
Yeah.
And when we're responding to something negatively, I think that the thinking is that if we can eliminate that negativity, that somehow or another the heart and the problems themselves will also go away.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to sit with the uncomfortable, whatever that is.
Yep.
And the only way through it is through it. That's something that I will say to myself when I'm feeling stuck. It's like, well, what I'm resisting will just persist. So the only way through it is through it. And I think when you can stop judging it and you can have that empathy and just, all right, let's go. We're going to walk through life, holding this and maybe this and this and
all of it,
right? You're just lugging it around and just trusting that you will move through it. But the only way through it is through it.
Yes.
So.
And that is the most miserable statement
Yes.
ever, isn't it?
Yes.
I remember people would say, you have to endure your problems. And I'm like, when somebody uses the word endure,
Right.
I'm like, to me, I picture somebody is telling me to run 20 miles in waist-high mud. And I have to get 20 miles in this
and it's
way.
never going to end.
Yes.
There's
And
no
I'm
way
like,
out. You're going to run, but you're just going to be in it forever.
And it just, endure was like, endure.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like,
Like, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to sit. I'll just stand
yes.
and endure it.
Yes.
That's got to be slightly better.
Yeah. So I just think that, the endure, I don't know why that word was always like, it, I mean, you hear that a lot here in Utah with the endure, you'll endure
to the end.
Yes. And it's like, you know what? I'll smack you in the face right now. Don't say that to me one more time.
So I can see that even with the only way through it is through it.
Yeah.
I think for me, I've learned that the sooner I accept that, the faster I'm going to move through it.
Yeah.
And it does alleviate some of the angst that's tied to those emotions because you kind of make peace with what is. And I think that that's some of what you're talking about. There's an aspect, that shift that you're talking about is you worked to make peace with what is.
Yeah.
And then what? Then what did you do? You made peace with what is, and you had empathy.
And
where
then,
did you find your joy?
I found joy. One of the things I teach about in my life coaching is that, and I did a post about this because people will post on there, like we were talking about, and they'll make these comments as if they are facts. And so
Yes.
it's funny because you read through them, and even the good ones, you're like, that is just their thought, and that's just very telling about who they are. And one of the things that was so important for me to understand is the circumstances are neutral. They're completely neutral. So my husband's diagnosis was completely neutral, but my thoughts or the story I create around that, like you can sit there and be like, oh, this is so hard, or whatever you think of, like, I'm never going to get out of this. Or I don't know, separating that out versus the story you tell about it. And that was probably the point where I found joy, where now anytime something comes at me, I'm like, oh, this is just a circumstance and it's completely neutral. What do I want to think about it? And that doesn't mean I don't want to be sad. That doesn't mean I don't want to have those emotions of like feeling sad about something. Like if there's something that comes up with my husband, it's okay for me to feel, or I'll see an old photo of when we were, I don't know. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that popped up, and it just like brings back all these memories of, oh my gosh, that was my life one time. And it just, because you get used to your life, like you forget about that.
Right.
And so I think that was a huge thing for me. Finding joy is just realizing I have a choice in this. I have a choice on how I want to think about this, how I want to move forward, and how hard this actually needs to be for me. Because there's something to be learned with everything that gets thrown our way.
I agree. I want to pick on that point, that this idea that this circumstance is neutral, because that might be somewhat of a foreign thought to some people. I think
I think a lot of people, actually.
I'm trying to be nice.
Sorry, my bad. Here I come in wrecking it.
Yeah, you're wrecking the whole
Trying to be
thing.
positive.
I'll just sit over here in the corner and close my mouth.
No. That's too far.
We need you over here.
Yes. It's, co-host. But can you break that down a little bit more? Because I think deciding that your husband's diagnosis is a circumstance, and then what story am I going to build around that? That is a very conscious mindset. So how would you break that down? How would you explain to someone who has never entertained the idea that this is just a circumstance and circumstances are neutral?
So I actually, on a video I did, of the negative comment, I think I was going to say this. I posted somebody's negative comment because they said something like, your husband's being lazy and he's faking it or something. It was just a fake comment. So I got on and I walked outside in my backyard. And did you guys see that post where I showed the sky?
And that was just recently?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I asked my audience, I said, if I were to say it's gloomy outside today, what would you say that was a fact? Or is that just a thought that you have? It's gloomy outside. It was raining. The sky there were clouds in the sky. And I asked my audience, is that a fact? Or is that a circumstance? Or is that a story? And a lot of them said that it was a fact when you say it's gloomy outside. But the reality is it's not. And I even had someone be like, gloomy is, they said it's like something like less light or something. But that definition of less light means something different to everybody. So the circumstances versus the thoughts. So let's see. This is one story I'll tell. I actually am doing these free courses. And one of the stories I tell in my course is, that story, maybe you guys have heard it, but there's two brothers, and one brother is successful, wealthy, and he has a family, and he vowed that he would never drink alcohol. And the other brother is homeless and doesn't have a family and is an alcoholic. And when we ask the wealthy brother how he became successful, the wealthy brother says, because I had an abusive alcoholic father and I didn't want to be that way. I didn't want my life to turn out that way. So this is why I became successful and wealthy. And you ask the homeless brother, and the homeless brother, you ask him why his life turned out that way. And he said, because I had an abusive alcoholic father, and this is just the way the life has to be for me. So our thoughts, you can have this, that is a neutral circumstance that they both had. They both had an abusive alcoholic father, but they both chose to think differently about that. And you can have the same circumstance and attain completely different things in your life. Mm-hmm. So
that's a fantastic way to explain that. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I love it.
I call that the victim or victor mentality. Right. You're all in that same situation, and you have a choice.
Right.
You can either be a victim of it or you can be the victor. And make that choice. So I love that. That's great.
But even I've been in a meeting with someone and walked out of the meeting, and then you exchange notes and perceptions about what the message was. And it's like we were in two separate meetings,
Yes.
listening to two different speakers. And I had a business partner for 7 years, and there were times when we would sit in on something and then have to come and work together to decide how to approach something. And I would say this, and she'd say, "Yeah, I didn't get that." Right. And I'm thinking, wow, were we in the same room? And so I think that story really captures that mindset, and I'm going to remember it.
And it's also, I know you guys know this, but we take our past experiences and we use those, and that's what we judge things on.
Right.
So I was having a conversation with my daughter, and she was like, well, I was at work and my boss was just staring at me like, and I can't even remember what she said, but she created something like, well, he was staring at me like he wanted me to keep talking, or he wanted something. And so it was giving her anxiety because she loves where she works, but she doesn't want to mess anything up there. And I said, say that to me again. And she's like, well, my boss was staring at me like, and I'm like, you need to stop right there. Your boss was staring at you is the circumstance. End of story. Your boss is staring at you. The rest of it is everything that you're creating about what happened. You got to choose how you felt and thought about that. You could have said, my boss is staring at me and he's checking me out.
That's the end of the story.
You could have
right?
said anything you wanted.
Yeah.
Or like, my boss thinks I'm the best worker here. Like, you can think anything that you want, but it all stems from our own past experiences. And so I think that that's so important to understand. And some people have come from negative past experiences, or just, I think that's so interesting to see the comments that come through on my social media, or even just read other people's comments. And then it makes me cautious to go comment on somebody's page, because I'm like, whatever I comment is just my thought, whether it's good or bad. Do I want, this is going to portray me? And is this like, I don't know. So that's kind of an awareness thing, that you realize that your thoughts are creating your reality.
Right. Well, and then you have to, I think when you start to understand that, then you have to allow space for other people's reality, right? And then you've got to navigate that depending upon the context of your relationship. So,
well, and just in that story of the two brothers, when you ask the two brothers, the one brother is like, oh, it's because my dad was an alcoholic father, so I didn't want to be that way, so I'm going this way. You ask the one brother, and he truly believes that his neutral circumstance is the reason why his life the way he is. And that is so true with all of us, is we have these circumstances and we want to push blame on them as if that's the way our life turned out. And so that's an important thing, that when people are telling us they truly believe, and they're not making it up. You could give them a lie detector test, and they are not making it up.
Right.
But that is what they believe is true for them.
Right.
So, and same with that meeting that you walked out of. You're
Right.
like, they totally believed their story. You totally believed yours, but there were facts of what maybe the guy said, or anyway.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So then, like I said, just, at that point, it's like, all right, well, you're over here and I'm over here. So, how do let's have a conversation and figure out where things align, right? Where, so anyway, I just think it's interesting it's just interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's interesting.
That's a lot of good stuff that that we've talked about before. It reminded me, we talked about the 4 agreements. I don't know if you've heard of those.
I
yes.
started to read it, but I never read it all the way through.
Oh, they're good.
It's
Quick read.
so good.
It is a quick read. I think I have it at my house.
56 pages or something? No, it's less than that.
I don't know.
It's less than that.
I just know
It's
that
quick.
if you find 90 minutes a Saturday morning, you
Yeah.
can get through it.
Okay.
But it's, you mentioned, it took me back to don't make assumptions.
Right.
Like your daughter, the boss looked to her, and then as soon as it stopped at look, she started making assumptions.
Right.
Yep.
And creating this story.
This whole narrative.
This whole narrative, and we all do it, right?
Yep.
So we're all trying to like, at least I feel like, I hope like that we are trying to realize that and not make assumptions
Yeah.
about people and things and situations. And, I talked about, my mom always said, well, you never know. Somebody could be, they have a child throwing up in the back seat, when someone cuts you off.
Oh, yeah.
Or something like that. And I think we can carry that through our daily lives and in all our interactions, because we don't know. We're perceiving something different. There is facts and truth in the middle, but you're perceiving it from different places. So don't make assumptions like we talked about. And then you also mentioned you were, responding to those and how you comment. Now you watch how you comment, because you get a lot of comments. And so then it goes to one of our episodes which talked about the agreement.
Be impeccable with
Be
your
impeccable
word.
with your word. Thank you. And that you can use your word to create or destroy. And like, if we could remember those things, don't make assumptions and be impeccable with your word. And the other ones too are really good.
They're all great.
But yeah,
And you've actually touched on all of them.
yeah, you have.
Is that right?
You've touched on all of them.
Yeah.
Be impeccable with your word. Don't make assumptions. Don't take anything
things
personally, and always do your best.
Always do your best.
And so, yeah, it was a real impactful book for me. But you have touched on.
Yeah, I'll have
really
to
all
read
of
it.
them.
I did start to read it, but I think at that time in my life, I probably wasn't really ready to read that book. But
It's super good, and I think it can help a lot of people. And you talk about all those things.
Yeah.
Like, don't just stop it right there. Don't make assumptions. Don't build a story
Yeah.
around it, and then be impeccable with your word. Like, really pause and think about what you're about to say. Like all those people on on your social media, and like we were talking about before, like people are like, "Hey, you got a big head,"
Oh, yeah.
or whatever, and it's
And
just like,
Lucy needs a nose job.
yeah, like, are you stopping and really thinking about what
don't
you're
have time
saying?
for that.
Like,
But this is what I always ask, like when people say that, when they say that's a big head, what is their definition of a big head?
That's true.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Please
Like
define it.
define it. Like define what big head means to you, because that's the whole thing about those circumstances. Like I could, one of the ones I talk about is like if I said it's December here in Utah and I say it's cold outside today, and people would think that's a fact, but the fact is it's 32 degrees outside. And so if you say it's cold outside, somebody in Canada who's living in negative
no,
30,
hey, it's negative 40.
is like, where's my bikini? Because I'm ready for that.
Right?
So that's the thing about all of these thoughts that we have, is even that word, big head, they clearly have a definition of a big head. Like, what is
It's
your
all
definition
subjective.
of it?
And then
Do you know what I
someone's
mean?
going to get on there and be like, actually, the average circumference of the human cranium
I was just
is.
thinking we could do a little video where we measure your head
I'm
and
gonna
then
measure my head.
It's
Clearly.
Do that.
do some
Clearly beyond
statistics out
average.
on Google, and then we'll say, actually, it turns out that his head's really kind of small.
Yeah, or average or
I mean, I got
whatever.
a tiny head.
But
It was the lighting. You had it wrong.
We'll have to be impeccable with our word. And instead of saying it's large or medium or small, we'll just say it's exactly
It is exactly.
this measurement.
It's exactly that. Or you just have a head.
24
That's the circumstance.
centimeters.
You have a head.
Yes.
I
and
just
you don't
tell
have
everyone it
hair on
houses
your
your big brain. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right?
like, there's a lot in there. He's got a
Yeah.
lot of good
I gotta,
stuff.
It's true. Say, I have a big head for a reason. Like,
right.
there's a reason I have
God
this.
put a lot of smarts in there.
But no, one of the things as far as the watching your word, I'm on this little text feed with my siblings, and I said to them, because I woke up one day, I was having anxiety. I have a little bit of trauma that I've developed over the years that kind of just hit me
Understandable.
last year. Like, it was like, I didn't know. I'm like, of all the times this could have hit me, like, because you store all that trauma in your body, and it just all of a sudden came out. Well, I woke up kind of having anxiety that I had never had before, and I opened up my TikTok account because I have a following on there too, and I saw all these comments, and all of them were so sweet and so kind, and I screenshotted it and I sent it to my family, and I was like, these guys didn't know I was going to wake up today not feeling great, but they took the time to make a kind comment. And that, if I had woken up and saw that negative comment, I mean, I'd like to say that the negative comments don't impact me and that I'm able to separate out the circumstances versus the thoughts, but sometimes I want to reach through the screen and, give a little love tap over there. But I think when we use those words, like negative or positive, that is how you change a society. That is how you change humanity, is with a comment. When you are making a comment, if you recognize how important your words are, Like, how many people read that comment on a feed and either agree with it or not? But whether they agree with it or not, there are people being impacted by your comment. And so when you put a comment on there, that's how powerful your words are. Like, the person that is the influencer, you could impact their life for good or bad. And what is your intent? Did you mean to be a punk, or did you mean to be nice? Like,
Right.
So anyway, so words are powerful. I love that you were bringing that up.
They are.
Yeah. He says it's the hardest agreement to master, but it's the most important one. So
And that's in the agreements.
The four
book.
agreements.
the four
yeah.
agreements. Yeah.
Yep.
I think you're ready for the book. I think you'll love it.
I might be ready for it.
Yeah.
Time is of
I
the
think you'll read it and then probably be ready to maybe co-author volume 2.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I think you are. I really appreciate you coming today and just sharing your story. What's next for you? Like what's kind of your goal and kind of your what are you driving for your life?
I think you guys probably feel the same way too, but one of the things as far as the make your mess your message, I really want to help other people. And I found that through coaching, I can do that. So I'm creating these courses, the You Rescue You courses, and those courses are to help someone. I go through all of the circumstances versus your thoughts and what results you're creating in your life from those thoughts. Because as far as those comments on social media, if you take it to a deeper level, those people are creating a result in their life. Where else is that thought showing up in their life? Like, it's not just on my comment feed. It's showing up in their relationship with their spouse or with their siblings or at work, and they are spewing it on me. So I am starting a coaching program for people who find themselves in unexpected challenges, and the courses are You Rescue You, and that's because of that was the line that I kept going through my head whenever I wanted to be rescued. I'm like, it's like the most empowering and the most terrifying thing is that you are the person to rescue yourself. And the crazy thing about it is when you know that you are the one to rescue yourself, but you don't have you're not equipped with everything you need to rescue yourself, it's frustrating.
Right.
But you figure it out and you figure out how to do that. So what's next for me is just that coaching program. I really hope that's how you can change people's lives. All you can do is take your story and be bashed about it, but the people that you need to reach are out there, and they are the ones that you're looking for, and you just have to go through a lot of people's thoughts in the midst of it, So that's my next thing is I'm creating this coaching program, and so I'm just getting that off the ground.
Okay. Is that online, in person?
Yes,
both?
actually hopefully next Monday, I will be launching just 5 free courses or 5 free videos. They're the entry courses, and I go through circumstances versus your thoughts. And so those will launch next week. So I'll post a link they're just the free courses that they're the entry into it. In my You Rescue You series, there's 5 different pillars. One of the things, so my business is called 2 Hour University. And so it's 2 Hour You Rescue You. And during that time with my husband, I'm like, if I don't spend time on myself and educate myself, and I'm not talking about like going back to school, but like you can watch stuff on YouTube, and that's where my educations come from, is YouTube and buying like maybe small courses that are like a couple $100. But during that process, I was like, I need to spend time on myself. If I don't spend time on my health, and if I don't spend time educating myself, I'm going to be in the same spot I am in a couple years or 5 years from now, and I don't want to be in that same spot. So the 2 Hour You is spending 2 hours a day on yourself, even if you can't reach that 2 hours. One of my hours is working out, and then the other hour is I spend time educating myself or whatever. But you need to find some way to grow just a little every day, or educate yourself just a little every day. So there's 5 different pillars, and that is healing through your past trauma, which is circumstances and thoughts, healing from pain, processing pain, keeping the past in the past. That's all on the emotional side. but then there's the physical side and like, yeah, so there's physical and then there's education, making sure you're spending time on education. And then I actually have created a program that I help people share their stories. I mean, we have social media, and that is the place where you can make an impact on people's lives and helping them. So I go through all of those steps in my course. So yes, it's online, 2houru.com. So it's the number 2houru.com.
Okay. And then do you do any in-person coaching with people as well? Is that a service that you're
I don't. I do group coaching.
Okay.
But I do one-on-one coaching right now because I'm not as busy. But yeah, so I do some coaching.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll coach my family members when they need it. They'll call me, and I have to be like, "Hey, if I'm a coach, like I'm not jumping in there to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I'm going to coach you through this. We're gonna use things, and I'm not gonna be like, I feel so bad for you. I'm going to tell you like what your brain is doing and how you're thinking about your problem. So yeah. Yep.
Good for you.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
You got a lot of stuff going on.
You do.
So what's one quick thing that you could tell our audience?
Yeah, like a call to action. We
Call
always
to action, or like, hey, I don't know.
Like what's a call? I mean, I know what a call to action is, but what's your call to action? Like give them
something they can work on and do, whether it's like we've talked about so many different things, empathy or not assuming or
hugging people longer, more often.
Yeah, that was our
cold showers.
last episode.
Yeah.
But what we've talked about today, can you give them something that they can take home and do?
Okay.
To better themselves, to elevate their existence.
This is one thing I do, and this is one thing. I'm going to tell you two things. Is that okay? Can I give two?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I learned was I would beat myself up because I'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't get this and this and this done. And so one night I was like, I need to just write down things that I got done for the day. And so I started writing down, I call them my wins, but I just wrote down everything I got done for the day because I was feeling like crap one day, and I was just like, I need to just write down things that I did get done. And I was so surprised at all the things I got done. I was like, I did get stuff done. And sometimes that getting done is like, I showered today. You know what I mean? Like you can't always have these huge wins, but this one day was so surprising to me because I was like, oh my gosh, I really did get a lot done. And I'm sitting over here beating myself up. So one of the things I would say is write down 3 wins every night before you go to bed. You go to bed with just having that on your mind, and you wake up a different person. And when you do that consistently, it's just your life changes. The other one that I was thinking about today, and it's actually going to be in one of my courses because a lot of us don't feel lovable or worthy. And look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself until you believe it. And when you sit there, I mean, how many of us do that? Like we tell other people like, oh, it's okay, you're having a hard time, I love you so much. But how often do you actually look at yourself and be like, no, I love you. Like, I love you. You are doing a great job. And as cheesy as that sounds, like your brain starts believing the things that you tell yourself. So when you tell yourself you love you, like you say, I love you in the mirror, you start coming up with all of the things why you're lovable. And that was just one thing I thought of this morning. So that's why I gave 2. I like the 3 big wins and tell yourself that you love yourself.
All right. I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Thank you so much. So where else can people find you?
They can find me on my social media pages at LEWKELLY06. That's my Instagram. And yeah, they can find me on there. And then I have a link in bio to all my other social media platforms. So yeah, that's
awesome.
Probably the easiest. And then you can find all my website and coaching stuff on there. My coaching stuff will be up next week, but
awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds good. That sounds exciting.
yes.
All right. So everybody go give Lindsay a follow and check out her new coaching program, right?
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been awesome.
It's been a
Thanks for
pleasure.
having me, you guys.
Yes.
This is awesome.
Yes. All right. So I'm Lauren.
Lucy.
This is Better You is Better Living. Go give us a like,
like,
share, subscribe, review, wherever you listen to the podcast. All right. We'll see you on the next one.